Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Zoom. This is brought to you by Zoom, this call that we're having. That's the platform that we're on. I'm really thrilled to be here today with Tsedal Neeley, professor at Harvard Business School. She's an expert in organizational behavior. She's written and published many articles and books on those topics, and she is the author of a book that's coming out next year called Digital Mindset, and she's here to talk to us today about a topic that seems to be top of mind for everybody amidst the coronavirus outbreak that we're experiencing on a global scale. Many organizations are thinking about what they have to do to prepare their workforce to work in different ways that they never have before. People setting up remotely in their homes, or trying to find ways to come together without actually being physically in each other's presence. And it poses a lot of questions and challenges, I think, for organizations that haven't had to do this. So Tsedal has thought a lot about this, and she's here to talk with us about it. Tsedal, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You appear to be perched in a ladder close to the peak of Baker Library at Harvard Business School, and I'm actually standing what looks like on the lawn of Baker Library. Of course, neither one of us are in either of those places, and we're not in the same room, so we're going to demonstrate the technology today.
Yes. We're actually on Zoom, and I'm not perched, and you're not floating on Baker Lawn. We're actually using background images on Zoom, which is a terrific feature. I love this feature.
I didn't even know we could do it until we started just a few minutes ago getting online together, and you showed us how to do this really fast. So this only took a few moments to create a really cool virtual background.
Yes, and you know why I like this? I like this a lot, especially for people who have to work at home, who are worried about, do I need to clean my house? Do I need to prepare lighting? Do I need to prepare all these things before I get on my conference call? Actually, you don't. You can very quickly set a virtual background, as we did, Brian. I mean, it took us, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and choose the one that works for you. And it covers whatever background that you have. You have great lighting, and then you get on your call. It's kind of like they do on television, actually. It's like the anchors.
Yeah, you could be anywhere in the world that you want to be, and without any expense. One of the things I do want people who are watching us to know about is that this week at Harvard Business School and Harvard University more broadly, we announced that we are going to be asking students to stay home following spring break, which happens here next week, and to finish out the semester doing their classes remotely. And so this conversation we're having today couldn't be more timely, just as organizations like Harvard Business School think about what does it mean to scale this kind of a remote engagement with each other up to the hundreds or thousands of people trying to participate in these kind of conversations. So I'm really glad we're having the conversation.
I am too. We're joining many institutions, many companies, many. I'm talking about by the millions. If you look around the world, who have asked their employees to begin working from home. I've been following the hashtag WFH for several days now, and people have questions and very suddenly trying to figure out, how do I work remotely? So hopefully through this conversation, we'll be able to answer a number of the questions that have come in for us.
Yeah, and so I've got some questions. Can I just start, throwing these out at you, and we'll go from there?
Let's do it.
These questions we sort of crowdsourced these. So these are coming from people who are thinking about this now and probably dealing with some of this stuff. And one of the first questions has to do with, all of a sudden I find myself in a situation where I'm not going into the office. I'm used to being in the office. I'm a social person, and I'm used to being with my coworkers, and yet now I'm told I've got to work from home. Even if you have the technology, how do you stay focused when you're at home, and how do you think about focusing on your job, and how do you deal with kind of the mental aspects of sort of being in isolation?
It's a very important question, because suddenly your regular routine has gone away. And the thing to do actually is to create a new routine that is a home routine. Mm-hmm. And this new routine has to have a start time and an end time. You've got to get up, You've got to take a shower like you normally do. You really, really do. You've got to get dressed. You may not wear the same things that you usually wear when you go to work, but you've got to get dressed, and you've got to go to the place that is the most comfortable for you at the home or the space where you would work, and start the workday. So you need a set of practices, disciplined set of practices that are comfortable for you, and you can experiment to see what works for you and start your workday. And that allows you to create the kind of routine and discipline that you follow on a regular basis.
Yeah.
The other thing is, make sure that you remain in contact with your colleagues throughout the day. Just because you no longer are going into the office doesn't mean that you have to isolate yourself fully.
Mm-hmm.
You need to continue to remain engaged with your coworkers, whether it's through email, if you have some enterprise wide social media type of software inside of your organizations like Slack or Jive or Yammer that you've been using. Continue to use those. In fact, I would say increase the usage of those types of tools in your organization. And so continue to engage with people on a regular basis so that you're not isolating. So number one, the routines are very important. Number two, the contact with others are important. And then move. Don't sit all day. If you're used to a certain level of physical and physiological activity on a regular basis, make sure you recreate that. Otherwise, you're really going to start feeling bad.
Yeah. How do you fight the sort of challenges of diversion when you're at home? You've got a dog. The dog wants to play, right? Or there's a show on that, there's something that you want to maybe watch on TV. I mean, when you're at work, those distractions just don't come at you the same way as you do when you're at home. And when people are at home, I feel like I know that I get into kind of like my home routine, which is very different. How do you sort of fight against that?
Yes, which is why it's really important to create work routines at home.
Yeah.
And you have to be really, really, really disciplined. I work from home a good deal because I write a lot. As you know, I'm a writer on top of other things. And sometimes I actually have a lot of calls that I make because of the global part of my job means that sometimes I'm making calls at 5 a.m. or at 9, 10, 11 p.m., depending on where my partners are anywhere in the world. So you actually really need to create and carve out the space, the physical location where work is taking place, and you need to be very disciplined. Having said that, you also have flexibility when you're working from home.
Yeah.
Which means playing with the dog is perfectly fine. Play with the dog if the dog is there. It also means that you don't need to have lunch at noon anymore. You can eat lunch at 11 if you want to. Right. Flexibility is a little bit different. You can take a walk at a certain time if you want to, and that's perfectly fine. And managers and organizations need to understand that the rhythm of work and the workflow is a little bit different, and they need to accommodate that. Especially some of the things that we're seeing and hearing now is that my partner's also working at home, and now we have space that we need to have to figure out. And wow, our children may be home more than we're used to, so you need to navigate childcare a little bit differently than we had to. So we need to be a little bit flexible at the moment because the world is in a different spot right now. It might change in a little while, but we need to accommodate people.
And so that brings up another question, which is, I know when we've talked about remote working here at Harvard Business School, it's a topic that comes up a lot. The commutes have been terrible in Boston. We just won this award. Second year in a row, we have the worst traffic in the country. So we're really thrilled about that. But what that means is that we're trying to find ways to accommodate people and make the schedule more flexible. And the issue that we hear a lot is, how do I know my team is really working? How how can I hold them accountable if I'm not in their presence, and and I know that they're at work.
I'm still laughing about our award of all the awards,
Yeah.
how come, I mean, that one, wow. I don't know, not to be so proud of,
I know.
but how can I make sure my team is working? Listen, this is what I always say, especially when it comes to remote work, or I'm working from home, or my team is globally distributed, so I don't see them. You have to trust your team.
Yeah.
This is where I get inspiration always from Ernest Hemingway, who says the way to trust people is to give them trust. That's the way you get trust. It's to trust people. You know your team is working because they're delivering on the work that you've set out for them. And if they're not delivering on the work that you've set out for them, then you manage it and you deal with it. So, but the idea of monitoring people or looking at what they're doing at a particular time needs to go away. You
Yeah.
cannot do that with remote work. You cannot do that when people are working from home. You've got to abandon all notions of monitoring people when they're working from home. But the thing that you want to do, one of the first things that you want to do when people are starting to work from home as a manager, is to do a team or a group launch.
Uh-huh.
What do we mean by that? You want to get on a call, preferably a video call. I'm hoping that you have access to a video call, kind of like we have right now,
Yeah.
with Brian, and you do what's called a group launch, a team launch. Every team has to have some kind of a launch. This is one of the success factors for groups or teams, is a launch. And over time, every group or a team should have what's called a relaunch to make sure that we're checking on the health of the team or the group and to see how we're doing. But now that people are suddenly doing the hashtag WFH, working from home, get your group together and say, okay, now that we're working from home, let's talk about how should we best operate as a group?
Yeah.
How should we communicate? How often should we communicate? What are the challenges that each of us might have? How can we overcome them? How can we work together as a group to overcome those? How can we make sure that we remain connected with one another? How can we make sure that we continue to have the informal contact that we're used to? And then as a team, as a group, you can come up with creative ideas. There's some things that you can do. For example, Brian, you can still have happy hour,
Oh,
remotely.
really?
You can.
And
You
you're
can
not
have lunch
driving.
together. You can have lunch together remotely. You
Uh-huh.
can do a lot of fun things together. You can remain connected as a group, even though you're not at the same place. So I would do a launch to begin to set up our new way of working, get some agreements, get people on the same page, and get going.
Yeah, that's great advice. It sounds like you really need solid tools and support to make this work. Can you talk a little bit about, how do you train people up to get them to feel comfortable? Because even when you're at work, you run into an issue, you can just call IT, or they come over and they'll fix whatever's broken. When you're at home, it's a different story.
So it is a different story in terms of having people to fix little things here and there that you might encounter from a technical standpoint. You don't have that, but I don't know who you have IT people who come to you when you've got problems, Brian.
I got a secret number I call.
I know you're special. See, Brian's got all the beloved Brian. But no, the thing about it is remote work is a different skill. It's a different skill for individuals. It's a different skill for leaders and managers. Number one, the number of contact that you have as a manager with individuals in your kind of sphere has to go up, particularly as people are trying to figure out how to work in this new format. So if you're used to meeting with people at a certain number, I would increase that, maybe even twice as much. I would check on people to see how they're doing, how they're coping. So send a note, send an email, just ask questions. How's it going? Are you doing okay? Are you getting set up in the way that you want to? One of the things that I'm hearing about is that some people have laptops, they have monitors, they have easy access to the resources that they need in order to begin their work from home, but others don't. Managers need to identify those issues and they need to find ways to resolve them.
Mm-hmm.
So even if people don't have access to laptops, you have to make sure they can have a way to dial into their systems. How do you do that? Can you get loaners for people? Can they have ways to dial into their systems, VPN systems? What are the ways in which people can have access to their resources, their work, in order to participate? You don't want to create an environment where you have haves and have-nots.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing is you also don't want people to feel like they have more access to you as a manager than others in the group. Because in the absence of objective, true information, the bubble of people's minds starts to go crazy and people imagine the worst. So it's a period where you have to over communicate. You have to feel, people have to feel your presence a lot more than usual. And you have to make sure that people are in tune with the big picture because they've been extracted away from work.
Yeah.
And they're now in their homes. They need to understand what's happening in the organization. The economy is starting to shift. They need to understand how to respond to customers and clients or whatever stakeholders who themselves might be grappling with shifts and changes. And it's up to you to make sure that they feel connected as well. There's
Now,
also, yes.
I was going to say a lot of our listeners may not be in management positions. These might be, people who are rank and file workers, and they're trying to grapple with this too.
Yes.
Just as it's important for a manager to sort of double down on communication with their team, would you also say it's important for a team member to maybe at the end of the day shoot a note to your manager and say, hey, here's what I just want you to know. Here's an update on a few things I was working on today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wouldn't even wait until the end of the day. I might even start the beginning of the day to even say, these are some of the things that I'm working on, thinking about. These are some of the challenges that I'm concerned about, and engage people, because at the end of the day, it might be too late to solve some issues. So getting some guidance, some insights early could be very helpful. The other thing is people need to communicate more than usual. So you might send an email, but you might also get on Slack and replicate that communique, or summarize and send some form of redundant communication.
Yeah.
And so you really have to over communicate and check in a bit more as an individual contributor as well. I think that's very, very important. And managers will appreciate it because, believe it or not, people are trying to figure it all out. And it feels like it's a period where there are more questions than answers at all levels of the organization, internally and externally. So individual contributors doing their part, trying to reach out to their leaders, it's a fabulous thing to do.
Yeah. Now, I have a question that's a little bit in the weeds, but if you're a manager and let's say you've got a team of 15 or 20 people and you're trying to run a meeting online, how do you manage that? How do you have enough presence there to be able to orchestrate that kind of a conversation?
I think it's a very important question, actually, because running virtual meetings are different than running face-to-face meetings. First and foremost, it's very important that you set some ground rules, explicit ground rules that people follow.
Mm-hmm.
Part of those ground rules has to do with making sure that people are paying full attention have people turn off devices. So ask people to turn off their devices when the meeting begins.
You made me do that before we started our conversation today. You made me turn off my stuff.
Yes, you saw that, right? I said turn off all of your devices, quit, your email, etc. You don't want those to start ringing, right?
Right.
Second thing is you want people to make sure, that people are not multitasking, so that they are present and paying attention, not only to you, but to one another. And you want to set those norms as well. And so you want to make quite explicit that part of those ground rules. Third thing is you want to make sure that everyone is participating in kind of an equitable way. So you want to invite every member to participate, and you want to make explicit that you want airtime to be shared, and you want to say that explicitly so that everyone understands that they're invited to contribute, because it's very easy to recede in a remote conversation, much easier than in a face-to-face conversation, believe it or not. And so you want to set that expectation. Fourth and finally, one of the things that we have found makes a difference in a virtual conversation is to spend 6 to 7 minutes at the top of the meeting to not go straight to business.
Mm-hmm.
It's to almost create the water cooler conversation as part of the structured meeting, is to invite people to share a bit about themselves, their day, how they're doing. It could be anything that you're interested to hear about. It could be, how are you today? How are you handling? How are things? How are you adjusting to working from home? It could be our safety moment, depending on who you are and your culture of your organization. But go around and invite people to share how they're doing, so that you're inviting kind of a personal, informal moment. And as you do, invite those who may be on a lower status side of the group. Lower status meaning, people who may be new to the group, not people who are established to the group. I just joined the team. Or it could be someone who just joined the company. Just invite those who may speak less usually, have them begin and do that. And then you can jump into your agenda. Yeah. Start on time, end on time, and people will trust you.
And one of the things that I'm hearing you go back to again and again is this notion of really taking the time to kind of double down on the communication aspect of this, to let people know, because you're not walking by them in the hallway. You don't have an opportunity to say, hey, how did your kid's game go last weekend, that kind of thing. But finding the time in the room to continue to make space for those human connections that we know are so important in a work setting.
Those human connections, or we call them informal contact, that were first identified in the 1950s, believe it or not, directly contribute to the performance of groups. And that's one of the things that you lose when you are working from home or working remotely. First thing that goes, the water cooler conversations, or as my friends in Europe say, the cappuccino conversations, whatever you want to call them, the first things that fall off are those, the informal contact. And so you're constantly finding ways to recreate them. By the way, the other thing that goes away is kind of the face-to-face contact. And which is why the video calls, like the one that we are having right now, matter.
Yeah.
Find some kind of way to see one another is really important. We know not everyone can do it. You may not have the tools or the technology or the ability to do it all the time, and you may not want to do it all the time, but to try to do it maybe even once a week is super important. But those who can do it on a regular basis, I really recommend it, especially with these background things. You don't even have to clean your house.
That's great. Look, I've got time for a couple more questions. This one is a little bit more specific to a function, but for people who work in roles where it requires them to meet with people outside of the organization. Let's say you're in a sales role or you're in a product management role, and you've got to go out to where the client is, and all of a sudden you're being told you got to cut back on that, essential travel only.
Yes.
Or maybe the organization isn't letting people in. How do you grapple with something like that?
Yes. It's a question I've been getting quite a bit. It's not a very uncommon question right now, but I think it's no different than the question that I just answered, which is about you try to replicate what you would do in a face-to-face scenario through technology, which is video calls.
Yeah.
I would absolutely do video calls. You can't wine and dine. For
Right.
sure, if you're in sales, you cannot wine and dine, but I would do video calls, and I would do one-on-ones as opposed to one too many, because you want to build rapport, you want to build connection, you want to create a trusting relationship with someone else. You want to create a personal relationship with someone else. So one of the things that we've learned, and I'm talking about decades of research, is that you can develop trusting relationships with others that is equal to the trusting relationship that you build in face-to-face relationships online, just like the one that we're having right now through these conversations. Exact same relationship, quality of relationship, trusting relationship, but it just takes longer.
Yeah.
So for salespeople, for example, who now have to build these relationships through these types of mechanisms, it's just going to take longer for them to do it. So people have to recognize that, but they can do it, and they can do it fully.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of more contact, longer contact, but it can all be done through these mechanisms. And I think today people are nervous. They'll appreciate the mediated calls as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, for salespeople that are listening to us, they might get the edge on their competitors because they're going to take the time that they need to really, nurture that relationship. So I've got time for one more, Tsedal, if you'll stick with me for a second.
Sure.
We don't know where we are in the coronavirus, pandemic, what stage we're at. We know it's with us for a while, and here, at Harvard at least, we're ready to buckle down on this and expect to be in this for the next few months. But do you see this potentially as a catalyst that sort of propels us into a new acceptance of this kind of remote work, where we've been a little hesitant for all the reasons we've talked about today? We've been a little hesitant to take that step. Does this sort of force us in a good way to sort of make that leap of faith?
I absolutely think so. I think if there's anything positive and hopeful about all of this, is that for us at Harvard, for many organizations around the world, is that it's pushed people to begin to develop this repertoire of remote work, or to work in kind of a decentralized, distributed way, and forcing people to develop the skills in this medium, or the mechanism by which to get it done, and to get it done well. So people might not have chosen to do it this abruptly, in this kind of anxiety producing kind of way. But I think the good news is that this could be an added repertoire for individuals and organizations that we may use in the future. I don't think that the world is going to move in this direction wholesale, nor should they, because at the end of the day, the face-to-face contact is the gold standard, right? It's the most human way to be with people, to break bread. It's pretty fantastic. But we also know that you can have an equally effective relationship, online relationship with people, and be just as effective the world over. And this is one of the ways in which I think we're all being forced to learn, to grow, and to increase our repertoire around it. So this is one hopeful thing about this process. And maybe at the end of the day, every single person who's being subjected to this, an organization will say, we've now increased our repertoire. We can now do a little bit more. And I think that's hopeful.
That's a great silver lining. Tsedal, thanks so much. This has been a blast.
It's a blast to do this with you, Brian. What a treat. What a treat. I always love our conversations.
And we had no technical interference whatsoever, so it works.
It works. Thank you, Brian.
Cheers. I'm going to hold up my product placement for you. Cheers. Take care, Tsedal.
Bye.